ready to start with, I would say, the session of the day, which is on digital public infrastructure and GovStack. So I am sure that everybody has at least some overview of what digital public infrastructure means, but those who have not yet been to our GovStack booth, which is just downstairs, I'm going to start a little bit with an overview of what the session is about. But before that, I am Nele Leosk, and I'm Estonia's digital ambassador from Estonia. I work for the Foreign Affairs at the Digital and Cyber Diplomacy Department. So we are looking the ways of how to use technology for good and not for bad. But without any delays, GovStack is an initiative that was launched by now almost 4 years ago. It's an initiative of the government of Estonia, International Telecommunication Union, Germany, and Digital Impact Alliance, which is a UN foundation in US. And I'm going to give a little bit of the reasoning for us to come together and start this initiative, because by 2020, when the initiative was launched, we had all been at some stage of digitalization in our past journeys. I would say by then almost 30 years, because the browser was invented in 1993, and that really changed the landscape for governments, but also for everybody, because the internet came really accessible and gave also an opportunity to do things differently. So when at the very beginning of this journey, we all had very different understandings of what digitalization means. We all thought that we are so very different that we all need very different developments. So at some point in Estonia, and I briefly mentioned it yesterday at the opening also, some point in Estonia we realized that actually some needs we all share across the government, but also private sector. For example, we all need to authenticate people online. We all need to share data in order to provide good services. We all need payment solutions, consent service, and so many other services. So in 2020, we came together with our partner that thought, okay, why not come together, break the digitalization, or let's say digital society, into different components and see what would be, basing on our experience across the globe and across the sectors, what would be the ways to continue. So we have by now, I believe, 12 or 14 different building blocks: identity, consent, data exchange, and so many others. And we have developed, in a way, reference specifications for these different building blocks. Of course, it's not as easy. It's not that you take a solution that has been implemented somewhere and you start implementing also in your country or in your organization. I think by now we are all aware that it's actually a lot more complex. It's quite complicated to integrate these existing solutions to our already existing infrastructure and ecosystem. And I think this is what our session is also about. Our session is looking at how and what are these preconditions and requirements for making sure that we successfully implement these different solutions and integrate this with our existing infrastructure and ecosystem. So 2 years ago, and we will talk about this a bit in more detail, 2 years ago we, in GovStack initiative, developed also a framework of how to implement not only GovStack components, but generally what is needed to make digitalization work. So I am really proud to be here today with all my co-panelists. I'm going to very briefly introduce themselves, and I give them a chance to add if I miss something important. But I would like to say thank you to Luke Mate, coming from Smart Zambia Institute from Zambia, who has been a great partner to GovStack, but also to Estonia, and we will hear more about what they are up to. So thank you very much for coming. We have also Mr. Mohamed Mashaka, who comes from the Ministry of Information Communication from Tanzania, so welcome. We are missing one panelist, in case somebody has been looking carefully at our panel description. We are unfortunately missing our panelist from Djibouti. And I feel sorry for this, because Djibouti is actually one of these countries that has also taken a regional approach or regional implementation of GovStack, but we will probably hear more of them in the future. And then we have Ms. Mary Metias from our host organization. Thank you so much for joining us from the MCIT from Egypt. And finally, a very good colleague of mine, Mr. Ivar Tallo, who has been one of these co-founders of Estonia's digitalization and is currently Director General for GovConsult Foundation in Estonia. So welcome. And I would start with actually Ivar, because he is one of those masterminds behind the GovStack implementation reference framework, and I'm going to make sure that I'm not going to make a mistake in the official name of this document. It's Public Administration Ecosystem Reference Architecture, and we will be referring to this framework as PAERA. But I would now give over to Ivar and ask him to tell us what PAERA is all about.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me here. Let me start by just saying a little historic fact, in a sense that PAERA found its beginnings in Egypt. I was working here 2 years ago, almost to the date that we had a GovStack workshop, and my Egyptian employers asked, okay, so what is the GovStack and how to implement it? And I mean, now there is miles of way covered already, and all GovStack movement has become very big, but at that time it wasn't. And the building blocks were already there. I mean, the specifications were worked out. And what was missing was kind of the more interpretive part, how to situate one's country situation and which building blocks to use and how to use. So I was thinking about that, and with a good friend of mine, we thought of that this is clearly lacking, and we proposed the ITU, and Hani from the ITU, the head of the GovStack now, he was kind enough to see the light in what we were proposing, and so now we have some 100 pages of document. Hopefully it's readable, because technical things usually are not, and what we were trying to do was to balance between these two demands. From one side, there is a need for technical competence. On the other side, there is a need for governance. And these are different worlds. Civil servants who are not trained as IT people see world much differently than IT people, and it is sometimes difficult, or oftentimes difficult, for them to talk to each other. So PAERA is trying to kind of ease the governance people to the world of IT and IT people to understand what the governance fuss is all about. Because you are making the mistake here even now today saying, okay, data governance, it's just, I mean, we have governance, right? But it is actually different in public sector and private sector. The meaning is different, and the fundamental difference is that in government everything is based by the law. In the private sector organizations it's easy. I mean, if there is a will, if there is a measurement in the bottom line of how you are doing, and then CIO can basically generate any change that will benefit to this bottom line. But in government, it's way more complicated ecosystem. And it isn't until for many, many years, or rather decades, there has been a mistake that, okay, the governance people said, okay, we want also, let's say, digital services, so let's get a company and do this. And more often than not, these initiatives, despite the good intentions, fail because the technical companies don't understand the governance frameworks. And so the PAERA is kind of a way trying to explain these differences between the public sector and private sector from one side, between national level and organizational level on the other side. And I have to say tribute to this co-author of mine, Aare Lapõnin, who was the first person in the world who introduced payment of taxes online back in 2000 when we started it in Estonia. And I'm also kind of a digital dinosaur. We wrote the first digital strategy for Estonia back in 1996, and it was passed by the parliament in 97. So the road has been very long. And we have learned over this time that there is a kind of clear dependencies, and we express these dependencies both on the governmental level and on the organizational level in this PAERA. And just to everybody is welcome to read it, but not only read it, also to welcome to add to it, because we view it as a live document. So you can comment on it, and we'll come out with the new releases, like with a software, a good software living, its life upgraded often. So we hope with PAERA it's the same. But the basics, that there are different types of demands in the government and in the IT, and you have to find a way to negotiate these differences. It is a fundamental, and it is staying, and that is what this PAERA is about. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivar. So also from my side, I invite you all to check the paper, because it does lay some foundation on what is needed to make GovStack, but not only work. But this is still a document. So now we are going to hear how this document has been actually implemented. And I would like to start with Egypt, because Egypt is a country that has made considerable progress in digitalization over the past years, and we have also very close collaboration with GovStack. So Mary, I would like to start with you. And what are your takeaways? What it takes to integrate digital solutions to this existing environment? So what have been these institutional constraints, regulatory requirements, and advancements that you have done in Egypt?
Thank you. I would emphasize to what our colleague Ivar said on the PAERA targeted audience. And it's a collaborative work between the IT governance, IT personnel and governance people, because their collaboration will make the real difference, because they cannot work in silos, because IT people of course know how more into technical, but both have two different perspectives. And their collaborative work and the structure of the architecture and the make a clear step for each other, and come a common understanding, and give them like a common ground to start with. The PAERA document is very structured and have very clear steps any government or any person could follow. They have also an implementation framework, which is really what we experienced during our work, and it make it into phases where the ground rule, it just automate everything. This is the initiation phase. The second phase is is trust of data and how to work on the process of the as-is and enhance it, and then the process management and how to transfer from the as-is and to be, and our vision of utilizing and the how we can define the building block that we are use, because when we have the as-is, we're just working of what is existing on the ground. There is no digital, we just follow, just make the manual step into automated step. But when we realize it into the structured architecture and try to define the function that we need and put it on the real place and use and define the use cases and how to be utilized across different services or different domain will do the real difference. And starting with the minimum specification GovStack defined is easier for everyone to make like a gap analysis or where they really need, and they are starting with the minimum specification. And in some building block there are some additional specifications that you can work with, and each use case has its uniqueness to put in place.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Perhaps to explain a bit how we go, we are first looking at these regulatory frameworks and all the institutional setup, and then we go to practice. So I'm sure that everybody wants to hear of some concrete example of Egypt. So for the next round, maybe I will come back to Mary and give some example of how you have really implemented some of these recommendations that come from the PAERA document. But I'm moving to Zambia. We have heard quite a bit today, and I'm sure that we all also know that technologies come with positives, but they also come with certain risks, and we have to mitigate these risks while supporting innovation and digitalization in our countries. So Zambia has an experience in digitalization for quite many years already. So how have you balanced, or how do you see this balance issue that is often asked, the balance between regulating for innovation, to foster innovation, and to make sure that also the risks that are associated with it are covered?
All right. Thanks, Nelly. I think that's always something which we need to balance. I think we know that today, almost everything, there is the positive and the negative, yin and yang. So I think we have to exist in that regard. And digital transformation is not different. And when we speak about the legal or policy side, we ourselves have actually learned quite a lot as a country. I'll speak, for instance, from the institution where I'm coming from, which is the Electronic Government Division. Initially, it was just called Smart Zambia, and then it was actually sitting as an organization under the Ministry of Finance or Economic Affairs, as other countries have put it. When you see the organizational structure, you realize that some of these agendas need to have legal backing for them to actually be a success. Because of where it was positioned, and because there was no law or there's no law backing our operations, the ability to digitally transform the country was a bit limited, because you do not even have the command to speak to the other institutions that you are operating with or supervising. So in 2023, we actually have what is called an Electronic Government Act, which was signed, which beyond just giving the legal mandate to the division, it also places this institution under the Office of the President. because we realized that the authority to be able to bring digital transformation across other sectors is something which is very key. So placement, just that shift in its own was one of the big blocks that we've had to do. We can always talk about the issues to do with data protection. We have the Data Protection Act, which was enacted in 2021. But then even with all these laws, remember, laws by themselves do not really, if there's no enforcement, it's another challenge. So just last year, again, I think beginning of the last year, that's when we ended up having the Office of the Data Protection Act operationalized. So again, you see the need to have digital transformation moving alongside the legal provisions to ensure that whatever is being done within the boundaries or the confines of the law. And this has really helped us to get people to trust some of whatever we are doing. Because I think we heard even yesterday the fact that in digital transformation, the currency is trust. So if people think whatever you are doing, you're going to violate their data, we collect quite some sensitive data, personal data and everything. So people have to trust the government to be able to do this. And for us to make such strides as a country, we've had to make certain, set some of these laws. And lessons also have also taught us that when you just get certain laws from other jurisdictions, for instance, the GDPR, it may not really work for us in Zambia. We have the Cybersecurity Act, which was enacted in 2021, but I'll tell you that just this year, we are actually transforming, we are having it split because they want it now to have two parts. There's the Cyber Act and the Cyber Crimes Law, which are being coming out of there because experience has taught us now that, look, earlier on what we were thinking about was something like it will cover everybody, but now it's that it is not possible. And based on that experience, we are now transforming this. What I'm saying here, colleagues, is that ultimately when we are doing these laws, at a certain time, we have certain assumptions, but when we go on the ground, the reality may be different. Therefore, the laws should be flexible enough to be adapted, even as we are doing this transformation. But last but not the least, one of the things I wanted to just point out is also, we had a very interesting scenario when we started doing our government e-gov services. This was to do with the digital signatures. We have the law which provides for the use of digital signatures. However, the Ministry of Lands has also a law which governs how the title deeds are supposed to be signed off or given out. Unfortunately, the Ministry of Lands dictated that the signature had to be handwritten, whereas when we brought in the digital signatures, there was a conflict. And so we had a stalemate where we couldn't even proceed to produce the titles which people wanted. So you can see that even as we do these transformations, we need to ensure that we are transforming even not just digital laws that are in conformity to digital transformation, but even some of the other statutes or laws that are already existing, which govern some of the operations of government. So I'll take a pause at that point.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. I would like to maybe point out what something that you raised, which coming from Estonia, we believe has been quite essential also in our trust building, is that on the one hand, it's evidence that we need to have these regulations in place so that everybody knows exactly what is allowed in the virtual space and what is not, and what happens if these rules are violated.
Yes.
But on the other hand, it's also clear that it's not sufficient for building trust, as you also mentioned, that it actually is a much more complex process, and it needs to be in a way earned through good practice. So thank you, Luke, for this emphasizing this issue. So I would now move to Tanzania. Thank you for being here with us. And we move a little bit from the regulatory side to the organizations, because implementing DPI, we might need to change some ways how we have been used to running our government. So from Tanzanian experience, what you see are the most needed organizational changes in order to implement digital public infrastructure, digital public goods?
Yes, as from Tanzania, is a country in the eastern part of Africa where you can find all the big 5 animals. And it's where the highest mount in Africa is located, Mount Kilimanjaro. Organization issues related to stack, to us, first of all, was a journey. It was a journey because we started back in 2002, 2004, where we enacted the first national ICT policy in Tanzania. Then back in 2012, we established an e-government agency. That is where we started the journey of digitization in the country. Because as much as the digital transformation is concerned, the first stage to us was a digitization. Then we enacted an act back in 2019, and we changed the agency into authority. Then it came to a point of digitalization. That is where now it was a point of turning. Because to us as a country, we learned from India, from the India stack, and we learned much from GovStack as well. So we are a very good students of the two. The GovStack gave us a bigger lesson, especially when we had lots of these capacity building tours in Finland, Estonia, through a twinning project that we have with Estonia. We learned issues related to personal government, which is personal government is a vision that you can obtain after successful digital transformation. So as a country, as we are marching towards digital transformation, we successfully managed the digitization stage. So the digitalization part, then the government established the Ministry of ICT. So this is the structure. So the ministry where I'm coming from, I'm a director of Information System Development and Services. The big purpose was how now to provide the digitalization in the country. And it was very simple to us. Digitization managed by e-government. The ministry came to manage digitalization, which is actually managed by e-governance. So we moved from the e-government to e-governance. Now, with that, a lot of work had to be done. Number one, for example, in very short, when we looked at ourselves from the development point of these countries like Estonia, Finland, and the GovStack, the way it works and all that, we said we shouldn't be behind. We should set an example in Africa as well. So the first thing we did, we launched our national Tanzania Digital Economy Framework. The President of Tanzania, Her Excellency Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan, launched that back in July. Then immediately after that, we had to look into areas of digital public infrastructure and how we are going to do all this. So as I said, with all the experience we had from the GovStack, as a country, we established Jamii Stack. So Jamii Stack is a framework that we believe is going to transform not only Tanzania, but Africa as well. Because with Jamii Stack, that has 3 layers. We put the enabling layer, digital public infrastructure layer, and application layer. The 3 key pillars of the Jamii Stack is digital identity, data sharing, and digital payment. So these are the 3 key issues that we did. So in terms of digital identity, we really managed that. We established, as much as the organization structure we were talking about, we had to establish National Identification Authority that is actually in charge of identification in Tanzania. They were much concentrated into issuing the manual cards, but then we changed that. We leveraged the numbers into Jamii number, which is actually a digital identity part of it. And then it comes to another pillar of digital payment. We also went through a lot of issues, especially we learned from India, the like usage of UPI and all that. In Tanzania, we came up with this innovation called Tanzania Instant Payment System, which is an interoperable platform ready for all banks and non-banks. All mobile money, they interact through that platform called Tanzania Instant Payment System. Then the third pillar to implement the DPI to us was actually the issue of data sharing. How could we do it? Learning from all the building blocks from the GovStack, having headache, moving here and there, we ended up went to Estonia again, learn about how the X-Road works. We were also a good students. We went home, we came up with another innovation called Jamii Exchange. So Jamii Exchange is an interoperable platform ready for cross-border data sharing. For example, in Tanzania, when you talk about Tanzania is a United Republic of Tanzania, we have Tanzania mainland and Zanzibar. So we created an exchange platform in Zanzibar and in mainland, and they are doing a very good cross-border. It's a learning we had, the way Finland and Estonia, the way they do all these cross-border. So in our country, we did that. So we have the engine ready, just waiting for our Honorable Excellency President to launch it. But everything, the foundation is ready. So the issue of organization structure is very crucial when you talk about the digital transformation. And the journey itself needs to be defined as a country, taking example of ours, from digitization, digitalization, and then the highest stage of personal government, which actually you will reach after successful digital transformation. And we are heading there because we have a number of issues that we are doing right now. But for now, maybe I'll stop it there. But we are really doing, for example, in Finland, they have Suomi and every citizen of a country, we aim to have their own digital account because this is a revolution that we have. So the Jamii Exchange to us is built with an open source software, trust, consent. A citizen needs to consent. It's a citizen who decides where my data needs to go, when and how. More or less similar to X-Road, but we added some few bits that helps us as a country in Tanzania. So the platform itself, actually, we have been starting welcoming all countries in Africa, because in Africa we have been talking much about cross-border, much about documentation, framework, how are we going to do a cross-border and all that. So the solution actually is in Tanzania right now. And we are really welcoming all African countries. And now we are pushing to do a pilot test with Finland and Estonia, how we can do the cross-border from our exchange to that. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mohammed. And you actually very nicely did the introduction to the question I want to ask from Ivar. But before I do that, I would like you all three to think of a cool case, or with a very impactful case, on implementing data public infrastructure, data public goods in some policy area in your country. Maybe it's education, healthcare, financial services, and maybe you can wrap it up in 1 or 2 minutes, because I was notified that our time is soon to be ended, but I can guarantee we are all going to be staying here and we can learn more about all these great experiences that are going to be shared. But now moving to Ivar, Mohammed already started to talk about the cross-border collaboration, and we focused here quite a bit on national frameworks, national legal frameworks, policy frameworks. But we have seen increasingly actually some advancements also regionally. European Union came up recently with an AI Act, was adopted. Before that, a new Interoperability Act. Global Digital Compact, a global framework, was adopted last week during UN General Assembly High-Level Week. So Ivar, what do you see the role and need for regional frameworks? Either they are policy frameworks, regulatory frameworks. What is their role, and where do you see the gap, perhaps?
Well, The role for regional cooperation, well, countries have generally similar backgrounds when they are in the same region, and many of the issues are quite similar, though there are differences. So the way how the regional frameworks really work is that you can learn from your neighbors, some good lessons, some bad lessons, and that helps. But let me also, if I may, come back for a very short kind of summary of this, what the three people, other presenters said. I mean, there is this kind of really million-dollar political question behind all this. How do we jump ahead? Is it possible to create a very rapid development? And actually, the answer, as surprising as it is yes. I mean, when we started in Estonia in the middle of 1990s, our salaries, average salaries, was $100 a month, and the computers were $1,000 a month. So it was a really big disparity. We were a very poor country. We just had gotten rid of the Soviet Union. We started to rebuild our country, and we did jump ahead. But when doing it or attempting it, there is what, here we have to pay tribute, as you did, to the digital public infrastructure idea. I mean, there are these foundational processes that need to be taken care of. I used to refer to them 10 years ago as e-governance infrastructure. And it is basically, well, now everybody has kind of used the access pillar, but then there is digital data, interoperability, digital identity. And it is really important to understand that if you don't have, let's take just one of these examples, digital data, it has been spoken here a lot. But just think of that. If your leaders are speaking about digital services without having taken care of digital data, the digital services are not going to function too well, as many of you know, unfortunately, from bitter experience. I mean, now everybody in politics is, it's fashionable to talk about the AI. And of course, it is a very interesting topic. But think about it. Does ChatGPT use paper documents? No, it doesn't. So you have to digitize first. So if you have digitalized the ecosystem, then you can benefit from this. It's the same way as we can say all good things about the oil. But if it is in the ground and there is no infrastructure to extract it from the ground, to refine it, to transport, to sell it, then the oil is not really worth very much. But if the infrastructure, the ecosystem is there, then you actually start to benefit. Then you can do all kind of wild jumps ahead. That would be my message from sort of experience of 30 years.
Yeah, thank you, Ivar. So now we come to the most fascinating part of our discussion and learn of something that has been implemented. So I would like to start with Zambia. What would you bring out from your country?
All right, thank you.
Oh, and I forgot to say that we don't have a lot of time, so we have maybe 2 minutes. So thank you.
We'll keep it short. So I think if I was to pick something from the Zambian story, then I'll go with financial inclusion. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Today, if you check, you find that just last year there was a survey which was done that by the first half of the year in Zambia, about 199 billion Zambian kwacha local currency was actually transacted using the mobile money platforms. Today, when they did it in 2024, that number has gone up to 222, I think representing about 12% rise or increase. Now, what does this tell us? We see that, and just last week they were announcing the budget. The budget for the country, I think it was about 270 billion kwacha. Now, what all this is telling you is that almost the entire budget of the country is actually being appropriated via the digital platforms, which to us is a big plus in that where previously the country was known to be a cash-based economy, where money, always transactions were cash-based. Today, we have such huge volumes that are being transacted electronically. This is a huge gain for the country. However, we know that with this now, we need to manage other components that come, which have to enable this economy. And part of which is the country pushed for the mobile network coverage, which has been done in collaboration with the private sector. And to the extent that government also, in realizing that the private sector may not be able to have the full coverage, also stepped in and gave a license to Starlink. So we have Starlink also operating in the other underserved communities or areas of the society. However, in looking at DPI, we're talking about inclusion. Not everybody will have the devices to do these transactions. So what is the government doing in that space? So the Electronic Government Division, which is Smart Zambia I'm coming from, has gone in partnership with the Zambia Postal Services to use the post offices as digital transformation centers, where people can actually go there and access the over 300 electronic services that are sitting on the ZAM portal. But not just that, there are over 1,000 government services that are being offered electronically. So all this is trying to give that scale where people can be able to bring this financial inclusion and allow people to do their processes at the comfort of their homes. In the interest of time, I'll take my break at that point. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And I move over to Tanzania, and then we end with our host from Egypt.
Yes, as to be honest, one of the things which are obstacles in most of the countries that we have seen, especially in Africa, is number one, how do you transform the country? You know, those stages of transformation. It becomes sometimes, especially when you look into the area and how you differentiate between digitization and digitalization. How do you leapfrog your initiatives to personal government? How do you take advantage of e-government? And how do you move to the e-governance? So these are the key areas. At the end of the day, you will come back to the digital public infrastructure. As defined by United Nations, is a means to many ends. In the country, DPI is a critical enabler for digital transformation. So number one is to have a proper organization structure. That's very crucial. Number two, have a proper frameworks in place. As a country, we managed to have a digital economy, enterprise architecture framework, interoperability and standardization, digital public infrastructure blueprint. All these are the document that makes us ready to enter into a digitalization stage. These are the foundation, as mostly explained by the GovStack framework architecture and all that. So these are the things which we really need to have in place for us to go straight to the execution. Sometimes you might be tempted to move into the implementation, but if you don't have a proper framework behind you, it's going to be very difficult for that. Another challenge, something that we are really doing in Tanzania, is not about having a legal framework in place. Because when you are moving to the personal governance, it's a consent of a citizen. So you need to build trust. I think my colleagues here from Zambia, we talked about trust. So trust is very crucial because a citizen needs to consent to come to your digital services. So these are the things that we do. Number one, do awareness. Number two, create as much framework as possible, capacity building for your innovation. Because if you look on the DPI, the building blocks and use cases will depend much on the innovation. If I spoke here about the private sector and public sector, how do we do it? For example, in the country, we are in charge of bringing all these public sector and private sector in place. The economy of a country is driven by a private sector, not a public sector. But a public sector creates foundation towards building a better economy of the country. So later stage, then you come into the legal and all other aspects. So this is a very good experience that we believe we have learned from others, from the GovStack and others. So it's our hope that in the very near future to come, people will be coming to Tanzania and we share this knowledge to all. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mary, over to you.
Yesterday, on the opening session, one of the speakers mentioned or highlighted that we have to rewrite a social contract for the digital era. And if we back to the PAERA outcome, it's a society, government, and economy. And it's the same almost our colleague just mentioned, that it's a collaboration of all these elements. And the ecosystem of PAERA is founded on the legal framework, supported with the policy, the governance and policy, and the pillar of access, digital data and access, interoperability and digital identity. And I would map it to what we experience in Egypt and our practice that we already halfway in it. We started to look at the e-services with a different perspective. We are not looking to a service as an individual service, but in the context of a platform. If we have a different service in the same domain, for example, we have grouping or categorizing our services into different platforms, for example, education platform, which concern with all the services that the government provide to the citizen, social protection, business entities, civil services, labor market, and how we can enhance the service in a more effective way, and utilizing the principles of our I'm sorry. So when we divided the services into platforms, we put a design principles to make us to enable us to provide the service that the way we want to make it, and then we work it on the common components that will enable us to make it to provide it in a proper way, like, for example, I am information mediator. We started that we have to add more features on the existing IM to be to put in place the real practice we need. We added, for example, a business logic or event broadcasting to define the business, because one of the architecture principles is a data-driven. So we add more cognitive services to the citizen to enable them or to provide them in to enhance their quality of living. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mary, and I want to thank also all our panelists. So a big applause to them. Yeah, it seems to me, at least, that we have come to a common agreement that there is a common ground for digitalization, something that we know we need to make it happen, and we are already in the implementation phase. What I would like to maybe stress from my side is that GovStack is an open initiative. It's our common work. So we are very much welcome all of your experiences, all of your contributions. So if you want something to share, something to highlight, please, we are here. We have a great booth downstairs, and I hope to see you all either there or in Estonia. Thank you.
Is this on? Hey everyone, thank you. We'll have a brief break and get started again in 10 minutes. Thanks.